and welcome to Long Live Hooky Street, the podcast where we rewatch and discuss every episode of Britain's most beloved TV comedy, Only Fools and Horses. I'm Heather, and I'm joined from Austin, Texas by my co-host and sister, Jenny. Say hello, dude.
Hello. Today we're discussing Series 1, Episode 3, Cash and Curry. So grab a stack of poppadoms and let's get started.
Okay, so this episode aired on the BBC at 8:30 p.m. on Tuesday the 21st of September, 1981. Ooh, 5 years before I was born. Same schedule as the previous weeks. It aired after the Rockford Files and before the 9 o'clock news. Viewing figures this week were up to 7.3 million, so slightly up from last week. Prince Charming by Adam and the Ants was still the UK #1 song, and I still haven't listened to it. And Omen 3, The Final Conflict, was still the UK #1 movie at the box office, and I still haven't watched it. So not a lot changed in September 1981, I guess. So anyway, I don't have anything else to add about the background at the time of the airing. So do you have some episode trivia for us this week?
I do, but before I launch into it, I just want to say I did listen to the song because I was curious.
Okay.
You should listen to it, it's good.
Okay, all right, I will.
That's one of our new tasks. Every time something's at the UK #1 at the airing, you have to listen to the song.
Okay, then.
Okay, so let's get on with this trivia. Okay, so the title for this episode, Cash and Curry, is a play on the term cash and carry, which most UK people will know what that is. I did ask my American husband if they have cash and carry here. It is here, but it's under a different name. So they're the wholesale stores where you walk in, take a load of stuff and pay in cash. The curry part obviously refers to the presidents of the Indian restaurants in this episode, which again is a huge part of British culture, and I really love that Only Fools and Horses started off with an episode centering around curry houses, since it's one of my favourite things about England is the curry is everywhere. So this episode marks the only time during his lifetime where Grandad did not appear in the episode. And I only just noticed last night that he's not in the credits. Did you notice that?
I did, yes, when I was watching.
Yeah. What the hell? Okay. Yeah, of course, I mean, he's not in it, but I just thought that they would keep him in the title sequence, but they didn't. And I noticed it because the music was shorter. And I was like, what? Did I just skip that? Or does Leonard Pierce's pictures not in? And they're not. So this episode also marks one of the only 3 episodes where the Trotter flat does not appear. Do you know what the other 2 are, dude?
Well, okay, so the one they're in the supermarket would be one of them.
Yes.
I know that The Longest Night.
Yes.
I can't think what the other one would be.
Okay, it's Who's a Pretty Boy?
Oh, really?
Yeah, think about
I
it.
always think it's like that. I know they're in the Nag's Head and that, and the Pet
Yeah.
Shop, and then Curran and Denzel's. Oh yeah, I suppose they weren't they?
Yeah. Yeah. There you go. So only a couple of notable firsts for this week. So this was the first and last appearance of the Trotters' other car, the Vauxhall Velox, which I'd forgotten all about. And we got the first time that Del calls somebody John, I think. He doesn't do that in Go West Young Man, right?
No,
I wrote that down.
not that I remember.
No, because he doesn't call the guy in the club John.
No.
So this is the first time he calls somebody John. So the mysterious sounding incidental music used at the very beginning of this episode was also composed by Ronnie Hazelhurst, the composer of the title theme for the first series. So it's they didn't like this music, I guess. Like, they didn't like the addition of the strange kind of intro music, like the producers of the show. They said it made it have a different vibe.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like comedy music, does it? I think that's
No.
the difference.
That's the whole thing about this episode. It almost feels like it belongs in a different show, which, which I wrote here in my trivia, is that it mentions this in the lovely jubbly 40th anniversary book that was released a couple of years ago. The quote from the book that was, I believe, written by Jim Sullivan, John Sullivan's son, and a few other contributors, said, like many long-running television series, early episodes can often illuminate roads not taken and show the early development of soon-to-be familiar characters. Out of all of the episodes of the Only Fools and Horses first series, Cash and Curry is a prime example of a story which shows the series is still establishing its direction. So yeah, you can see this episode does stand out as a, for many reasons. No flat, no Grandad, but it also feels different to a lot of the other episodes. And then finally, last thing is the subject of music, which I should have said right after I mentioned the composing part of the original theme song. But we've got our first big notable music cut in this episode. Until I watched the uncut version, I'd never seen the version where they use Pink Floyd's Money on the montage. but yeah, this is the original song chosen, and you can kind of see that the montage is written to fit this song, so it is so much better with the original song.
Yeah.
But yeah, you'll only ever see that on the original airing on the TV, and it says it's still featured on UK Gold reruns, but I can't say I've ever watched this on UK Gold because this episode is not one that I remember being rerun a lot. We only had the VHS and the DVD.
I don't feel like this one is, or season 1 in general, is as popular on UK Gold as the later series. I feel like they tend to only show maybe series 4 onwards on UK Gold.
Yeah, you would be right, I think. I mean, we don't live in the UK anymore, but other people have mentioned that they seem to play the same episodes over and over, and I don't know how they decide on that. But yeah, I don't really remember when I was younger seeing the series 1, series 2 being played much. So, but yeah, that's all I've got in terms of trivia. Let's move on to the rankings for this week. So, for anyone who's new to the podcast, we independently ranked all 64 episodes, and then we go through and reveal and compare our rankings to each other for each episode. Okay, dude. So, do you want to go ahead and tell me what you've ranked Cash and Curry?
Okay, so Cash and Curry actually is a little bit higher, I would say, than a lot of my season 1 episodes. I ranked it as 42 out of 64 because I feel that it's a solid story on its own as an individual episode. I think it's creative. I think it's interesting. It's got some twists and turns. The comedy is maybe not as prevalent in this episode as it is in others, but I think the story is quite solid and I enjoy it when I watch it each time. So that's why I've ranked it 42 out of 64. How about you? What's your ranking?
Yeah, so my ranking for this episode is number 49. So yeah, I put it higher than Go West Young Man, but lower than Big Brother. I do actually think, yeah, you're right. This is a very plot-driven episode. It's got much more of a story than Go West Young Man. It would be hard to really explain what happens in Go West Young Man to somebody because it doesn't have as much of a plot. It's a lot more like character-driven. This episode of Cash and Curry, I like it. I do like the plot and I like it, but I do find like when I had to rewatch it last night to make my final notes, it's a bit draggy, like in some of the scenes, because they keep repeating the story over and over. Like when they have like Vimal explain it, then they have Mr. Ram explain it, and it feels like. And then Rodney comes out the flat at one bit, and he's like, "And he won't let the statue go until he's got the money." It's like they keep on like saying the plot over and over.
Yeah,
and
I think that's probably done
bit.
initially to hype up the urgency of the situation and to make it more manic because, as you said, it can plod on, and that was probably to heighten the acting, to be honest. The reason they kept repeating it because the actors had to go bigger every time they said it. But yes, yeah. I agree with you that the premise could be considered quite simple, honestly, in many ways. So yes, the repetition of some of the plot points is probably a little bit draggy, as you said. But I still think the overall idea for the plot is interesting. And
yeah, I agree. I think it's a good story.
Yeah. It's one of the few stories I believe that Del and Rodney really do get conned, like, completely. I think other stories where they lose out or they look like they're going to lose everything or get conned, there's always something at the end that kind of redeems it or redeems them or they get something back. Maybe not always. I can't think of another example off the top of my head, though, where they really do lose everything like they do in this episode and then the episode ends that way.
Yeah, I agree. I think we probably are forgetting stuff. But yeah, it does feel like one of the only times where they're completely conned. They lose everything and there's absolutely no resolution because the villains have just got away.
Yeah.
We'll go more in depth as we go through the episode. IMDb ranking for this one is 48. So one below mine or one above. One above mine.
One above yours.
I'm pretty, yeah, like at the moment, I've noticed that, yeah, just looking at my list, some of mine are the same as IMDb, which is funny. Okay, do you want to move on to the episode breakdown then, dude?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so we begin this episode with the Rodney. We begin this episode with Rodney coming to pick Del up. He's a Rodney. Coming to pick Del up from I guess it's a dinner dance function thing or the businessman's. I don't really know what the event is that Del has gone to here. Do you know?
It says here in the script, the sign on the wall reads, "The Peckham and Camberwell Chamber of Trade Dinner Dance."
Yeah. So why on earth Dell is at that thing to start with? I don't know. He's a fly pitcher. I mean, of all the things he'd be invited to, that's not...
I think contacts and stuff, right?
Yes, but the fact that Dell could get into an event like that is already quite strange. So let's brush over that anyway. But Rodney goes to pick him up. Dell's had a few drinks. He needs Rodney to drive him home. We find out that Rodney was previously engaged when Dell called with a girl.
Dell, what you fail to realise is when you phoned, I was in a flat with a friend.
Well, why didn't you bring him with you?
It wasn't a he.
Well, what was it then?
Which is something we don't hear Rodney being very successful at quite often. So, it's nice to hear that he was getting somewhere. And then, of course, we have the music that Jenny mentioned, which is the only time we ever hear this music. And the exchange between Dell and Rodney is pretty standard stuff. Again, just sort of a dispute about why Dell wants Rodney to pick him up to make him look, better than he is or have more money, and someone come and pick him up and drive him home rather than him getting a taxi or something. But then, of course, we have the very funny encounter outside where we see these two men in the car. They meet up with Vimmel, and then they come outside and they then come in contact with, I can't remember his name. What's the other guy's name?
Mr. Ram.
Thank you, Mr. Ram. Vimmel and Mr. Ram. And then they have this hilarious line, which is,
"My colleague here is a second dan in karate.
And I'm a black belt in origami."
When I was a kid, I did not understand this line because I didn't know what origami was. But now that I'm older, I find it hilarious. And then, of course, the idea of establishing Dell as a hard man. This is one of the early episodes where we really do see that Dell is a hard guy, meaning that people wouldn't mess with him and he's not afraid to stand up to someone who is much bigger than him. Rodney's watching and is worried, but Dell doesn't even flinch when this guy comes at him with his crazy karate moves. It says it's karate, but I highly doubt that's actually karate. But it's a nice establishment of Dell's character being the hard guy here. And then, of course, we have the
Police.
And then they look away and then Dell kicks him, which is also very funny. So, and then, of course, after that, we have...
Rodney, you and Vimmel, in the car, quick.
Right, let's go.
They leave without Dell, and then Dell is left with Mr. Ram, and he has to go and have some food with Mr. Ram because he's left alone and he has no other way of getting home. And, of course, then he changes his tone completely towards... I've written him as Odd Job in the script. What was his name?
Yeah, they don't. Because he doesn't have any lines, right?
No, he just makes noises.
But in the script they call him the Heavy.
Okay, yeah, because I know Dell refers to him as Odd Job, doesn't he?
Yeah, which is another James Bond reference, right?
Yeah,
I think John Sullivan loved James Bond.
Yeah,
because he's got lots of episodes named after James Bond.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I mean, it's a huge part of British culture. So, dude, anything you want to add about that scene?
Yeah. The only thing that I have in my notes here is that because we're still only on episode 3 ever of Only Fools and Horses, we're still learning new things about Dell here, and I think it's really important to note that he isn't going to just drive home from the event when he's drunk. Because a lot of people think that he is like a bad person. Like I've seen a lot of people like, oh, why would English people love this show about this criminal? Like I've definitely seen this said on the internet. But they give you pretty like early signs like that he's not just a complete dick. I mean, obviously I think there are loads of people in the UK that just jump in a car and drive, not just the UK, the whole world, that just jump in a car and drive when they're completely sloshed like that. But Dell doesn't, not that I remember ever throughout the whole of Only Fools and Horses.
No.
If I'm correct. He does weird things like walk home across the estate when he's drunk, and Rodney does the same thing. They leave the van at the pub. So
there is one reference I can remember.
And I will also teach him how to drive a three-wheel van while pissed out of his skull.
That's right, yeah, but I guess you could take that as he's pissed while he's teaching Rodney.
Could be.
which still isn't a good thing to do, but I had one other note on that scene, and that is that Vimmel and Ram talk to each other.
Thought you'd given me the slip, did you, Vimmel?
Why don't you go away and leave me alone?
which is
Oh, yes. Yeah, you're right. That's a big plot hole.
it's a massive plot hole, yeah. And they like that. I don't understand why he did that at all. I mean, they should have just had a heavy that spoke, right? And he could have just been like, "Oh, get away," or he could have explained it, or maybe because at this early stage in the episode, he doesn't want to explain that they can't talk to each other because they want that to be in the Indian restaurant. But when you then look back and his line is,
Well, why don't you just go and make him an offer?
Oh, it's impossible. It's this wretched caste system, you see. He belongs to the high caste and I belong to the low caste.
No, don't put yourself
We
down.
cannot meet, talk, or communicate in any manner.
Yeah, and he showed up to talk to him, really. So yeah, that I completely agree with you. Yeah, if they'd have got the odd job character, let's say, to do the talking, or maybe Mr. Ram had stayed in the car, that would have made
or
sense.
walked away, something. I mean, it could have been done so much better. And then that is so fucking funny that they talk. And then they're like, cannot talk at all. Like,
And
half
also
an
make
hour
it
later.
out as though they've been talking many times, because he says, "Why don't you go away and leave me alone?" I mean, that implies that he's
that's
actually
right.
been and tried to talk to him several times. So yes, you're right. That is a massive plot hole in the episode right at the beginning.
So, yeah, I don't really have anything else then. So yeah, you want to move on?
Sure. So then we go to scene 2. So here we have the Indian restaurant, and we have Del eating a lot. And then we have something that's a trope in many comedy shows. I know they do it in Frasier, where they have someone speaking in a foreign language in front of someone who doesn't understand the language, telling the kitchen, don't give them any more food, or don't do this, or, insulting them. And of course, Del says,
Yeah, John, that is twice, all right?
So then we have this hilarious part where Rodney comes in the background. And again, this makes me laugh every time, because Rodney, if he just looked around the whole restaurant before he started talking to individuals and describing Del, he'd have seen Del straight away. He was literally right in front of him. But instead of doing that, he comes into the restaurant and starts talking to the table right next to the door, when Del is... There's not a lot of people in the restaurant. It's literally that table and Del's table. So if he just looked ahead instead of going straight to that table, then obviously we would have seen Rodney right away. But then, of course, we wouldn't have had the exchange where he says,
Oh, I think your brother has arrived, Mr. Trotter.
Oh, yeah. Could you excuse me a minute, Mr. Ram?
yes, I think that's the reason it was done. And for comedic effect, of course, it's funny, Rodney describing and being all panicked and everything. Then we have... obviously now I don't really get these jokes. I don't really get the reference to the wicket keeper and the god Kuera. I haven't heard of either of these things, so they make a joke out of it.
It's a simple porcelain statuette of Kuera. You know of Kuera.
Oh, yeah.
You don't know who Kawira is?
Yes, I do.
All right, then tell us.
What?
Who is it?
Who?
Kawira.
Oh, well, he was... All right, I don't know.
There you are. See what I mean, Mr. Rhymes? He's got 2 O-levels and he thinks he's Bamba Gascoigne's vest.
All right, mastermind, who is he then?
Kawira was one of India's premier wicket keepers.
And then I do like the part where Del hears about the money and then the poppadom crunches. That's quite funny.
Yeah, that's
again, some physical comedy. We get that a lot. We hear about it's the setup for the whole story, basically, this scene. So we hear about the caste system, which again is bullshit when you consider the scene we just saw a moment ago, as you said, you've already pointed out. And I would say we already kind of established this. There's a little bit of karma in this episode, I think, from the con men getting conned, but we can talk about that a bit later. And then, then we have another repeat of the punched in the crotch joke from the first scene where Oddjob gets elbowed in the crotch again. Funny comedy. It's lowbrow, but hey, I'm lowbrow. I like that. So.
Yeah, I like this scene because it's a funny blend of like the story and the physical comedy. You start off with Rodney coming in and doing his like descriptive, like I don't know if you notice it, it's right in the background, but he goes all big to try and describe Oddjob. He's like, and you can't see on a podcast, so, and then he's like, he does that later as well when he's trying to describe him. He's like, big guy is small, and then he's got the spoon and he's like,
So, you're gonna be trouble, is there?
No, put the spoon down.
and then then you like you mentioned the poppadom, but then also the stuff with Oddjob. So they have a blend of like the physical comedy. But I also really laugh so much at the line where he says,
I'm telling you, Now, if I got into my car at 9 o'clock in the morning, it would take me up to 2 in the afternoon to drive around my land.
Huh? We had a car like that once, hey?
Yeah.
I don't know why that makes me laugh so much. So I have to mention that line. But yeah, like the whole thing that you said about the Indian wicket keeper, it's like it doesn't matter, you know, like whether you get it or not. It's always just a case of Del doesn't understand who anyone is. Like he does it later with Ming as well. So like, yeah, he doesn't know who people are or what things are or what people are referring to, and he just goes along with it as if he does, which is something that, you know, is an amazing amount of confidence. I never am able to do that. I would never be able to just be like, oh yeah, he did he? Like without knowing whether it was male or female, or like, I just don't know. Yeah, you don't know.
Yeah, there are
Del
multiple.
is
You're right. There are
always-
multiple
yeah.
examples of this in later episodes. I just think about season 3, the Nijinsky, the racehorse,
Yeah.
and the Russian ballet dancer. Did she? You know, that's it.
Nijinsky died in 1950.
Nijinsky was a man. So yeah, you're right. Del does this a lot throughout the season, throughout the series, even. Yeah, I think it's again a good establishment. We're still learning about the characters at this point, and this is a funny scene. So.
Yeah.
And then we go to scene 3, which is at Vimmel's house. So we get a bit of repetition from the scene we've just seen, where we have now Vimmel's side of the story. We've had Mr. Ram's side, now we get Vimmel's side, and it's a similar story when we see that Vimmel is not as wealthy as he made out. And I'm not really sure the point of the joke at the beginning when Del says...
Well, without beating around the bush, you know, I mean, well, you know, to cut a long story short, well, not to put too fine a point on it.
He wants to buy it off you.
Like, I'm not sure why they drag that out, because it doesn't even get a laugh on the laugh track, really. And I don't really understand what that joke was about. Do you know? Or any theories?
No, I think it's just early, like, testing out stuff. You're right, I did notice a couple times in this episode, I wish I'd written them down, where there's a joke and it doesn't get a laugh. But maybe, because, like, this episode, wasn't filmed in the flat. Maybe, I can't find reference to it anywhere. Did they just film this episode and then screen it to a live studio audience? Because it's not the same scenes, like scenery, as the other episodes. So maybe it wasn't filmed in front of a live audience, and so the laughter track is just from the episode being shown to an audience. I don't know. I was going to say, it could be another reason why this episode feels different, because the laughter track is not quite as prominent, and the scenes are different. Because, yeah, sometimes... I don't know about you, but I mean, I think this goes back to how episodes are warmed up, because Only Fools and Horses studio audience would have a warm-up act, like, which... incidentally was the comedian from The Little Problems.
So remember, Rodney, marriage is like a self-service restaurant. You get what you want, you see what your mate's got, you want some of that.
Oh, right, yeah, I remember.
Yeah, he was the guy that used to warm up the audience before. I don't know if it goes all the way back to series 1, it probably doesn't, but... so the audience would be warmed up, but you are talking about a different audience every night, and sometimes people are very good, and sometimes they're not. So sometimes it can be just based on the fact that the audience that night were not very warm, or they weren't very into it. But you're right, there were quite a lot of lines in this episode, I thought, that would have on a normal day gotten a lot more laughs. And that whole thing with Del being like, you know, not beating around the bush, you know, without wanting to put too fine a point on it, that's just Del's character. That's kind of how he warms up to deals and stuff. But the audience doesn't know this character at all, so...
Yeah, maybe that's why that sort
of...
interaction works better later on when we know Del better. I think if he'd done that particular exact line in, say, season 5, people would have been laughing their heads off because we know Del.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I mean, it's not a line, is it, really? It's just it's a part of his character. It's not a funny line on its own.
No.
I mean, one example of this is the fact that when Trigger calls Rodney Dave in the first episode, nobody laughed. But in a way, it's like, yeah, they don't know that why he called him Dave at that point. But later, it's going to have the audience like rolling on the floor. So it's really just a case of getting to know the characters and getting to know the show. So in this first series, there's going to be a lot of times when it seems eerily quiet in the audience.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's quite brave of them to stick with jokes that they could see were clearly falling flat. As you said, the Dave joke, they stuck with it, even though in the first season, I don't think it really hit with anyone in any of the episodes. And they don't really mention it until season 3 as to the reason for it, when they have that interaction between Trigger and Rodney.
Trig, why'd you call me Dave? My name's not Dave. My name's Rodney.
Yeah, exactly.
in,
So, but they
Homesick.
do, yeah, they kept it up, and I'm glad because it's always part, something that people know about. But yeah, like, it's got to be quite difficult as a writer to try to do these things that you think are funny in the early series, and then find that they're not getting the reaction that you wanted, or maybe people don't understand it. And courage to John Sullivan, because a lot of the times nowadays they're forced to take stuff out of shows, but he just kept it on. So yeah, sorry. So back to Vimmel's hotel.
So yeah, I wrote in my notes here that the communication block was bullshit because they were able to communicate in the first scene. So the thing that you
so you went back to that.
Picked up here. Then of course we've got this funny line.
Our late mother, well, she's dead now.
And then the Victorian Globe story.
She left us this family heirloom. It was this Victorian globe.
Meant the world to us.
As he said, it meant the world to us. Yeah, but there came a time when we fell upon stony ground.
We fell upon stony ground,
Yes,
did
we fell upon stony ground. And the only thing we had of any value was this Victorian globe that we cherished.
You sold it?
Well, no, I raffled it down a betting shop.
But of course you understand the sense of loss.
Well, not really, no, because by some stroke of fortune, Dell had the winning ticket.
I wasn't sure if that was true or not, because when Dell started telling the story, it sounded like it was bullshit from the way that Rodney reacted when he was like, our mother had a Victorian globe. It meant the world to us. Like, Rodney sounded like he was joking, that it wasn't really a globe. But then at the end of the story, when he mentions that Dell had the winning ticket, Rodney's like, oh no, it's just by luck, Dell happened to have the winning ticket. So it sounded like it was a real story about something they raffled, but then it sounded like the globe bit wasn't true. So I was a little bit confused about that story as well. I'm not sure what you got from that.
I think it was probably a true story, but yeah, obviously Dell didn't want to end it on the fact that they won the globe, but yeah.
Yeah, it just didn't sound like the globe part was true because of Rodney's reaction, but maybe that was just the delivery of the line, a bit confused there. The statue is cursed. I mean, I love that they try all these different ways to get him to give up the statue, again, in true businessman style, the way that they do it.
But I think that statue is cursed.
Rodney tries to warn Dell, and Rodney objects and then gives in. Again, another trope that we see many times, the objection and the eventual complicity. Is that the right word? Yes, complicity with the scam. And then Vimmel won't give the statue without money. This is when we find out this revelation that Vimmel won't give it without getting the money first, and Mr. Ram won't give the money without getting the statue, which is the whole setup for the episode. So it's actually sort of revealed quite late, this conflict here. And then I wonder, when I was watching this, I wonder if you felt the same way, Jen. If anyone has ever, they tried this with, because this is established at the end, they've done this scheme with many people. If anybody did actually find the statue first and try and fob them off with the statue rather than the money. Because obviously the way this scheme works is that people figure out they can raise the money and give the money, and then they get the statue and give it to them. But of course, then we find out the statue is readily available. If people just have a little shop around, they can find it exactly the same. So I wonder if anybody actually did come to them, come to Mr. Ram and go, look, Vimmel gave up the statue. Give us the money. I just wonder what that would have been like, you know?
Yeah, obviously you're not supposed to think of that. But yeah, like what if, because Dell and Rodney see the statue at Vimmel's hotel, right? And then they went back to Mr. Ram's restaurant for lunch on their way to the market, and they looked and they were like, oh, look, it's the statue.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it was that restaurant. And they're like, wait a fucking minute. Yeah, and then they take the statue back. Yeah. I know, but yeah, you're not supposed to think that hard.
Yeah, I just another plot hole, but I was thinking that when I was really analysing the episode, I was like, yeah, you could do that, actually. And also as well, it happened that Dell lied about the amount of money. So Dell lied that he was offering 4,000 instead of 2,000. So I wonder again, because that lie that Dell told ended up giving the con men more money. Yeah. So I also wonder, because they said 2,000, so were they only hoping to get 2,000? And then Dell and Rodney ended up giving them 4,000. Sorry, 2,000. No, wait. Hang on. Now I'm confused.
No, they don't. They actually get less, but I think it doesn't matter, does it? Yeah.
Yeah, because
they're basically banking on the fact that everybody is going to lie about the amount.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. Yeah, not very articulately.
Because they don't make money otherwise. Yeah, they wouldn't make money if it was if they only ended up getting, like, raising the amount, like the con men wouldn't be able to make money out of it. So they set it up deliberately so that the con men can see that, we can lie to him and tell him it's only this amount because they can't talk.
Yeah, I mean,
if they set up the deal as $4,000, they wouldn't make any money. So what's the fucking point?
Yeah, true. I mean, well, this is the other thing as well. Like, I just thought these are, technically the people they're going to be trying to con out of this money are people that would do a deal like this, or try and con these con men out of their money and their statue. So they're taking a bit of a risk because, like, if you approach some people like Del and Rodney, they assume that they're thieves, and not the best guys in the world. Wouldn't they be at risk of them just going into Vimmel's hotel and stealing the statue from him as well? I mean, surely that's a risk too.
Yeah, maybe they only go to, like, trade events and stuff and meet up with people who they think are, like, decent businessmen and stuff. I don't know.
But decent businessmen wouldn't lie to them about the amount of money and try and con them out of the money.
I guess smart businessmen. I don't know.
That's what
because
I mean.
They say, I'm trying to remember if they say anything specific about the types of people that they target in that last scene. They just said,
in fact, anywhere where there are people who think they can exploit the religious bigotry of two stupid immigrants.
It's the same with, I was going to mention this as well, because this episode almost feels like a very early attempt at chain gang. It's like a, how do they figure out who they target? Because they need, like, people who are in, like, certain financial situations, who have got enough friends, like the consortium and that. So, like, how do they figure it out when they don't know people? I don't know.
I mean, at least the con men in this episode were smart enough to leave town after they did the con, whereas chain gang, they all seem to be staying in a pretty close proximity to where to the point where Denzel actually is buying the next ones. I mean, you couldn't get more close proximity.
It's like, of all the people, like, one of Del's old school friends is the next person. Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, exactly.
So. Lucky though, huh?
Yeah, but anyway, so to end this scene, I guess it's kind of the same scene, but it's moving on to outside of Vimmel's hotel room. And then, of course, Del and Rodney discuss how they can raise £2,000 to give to Mr. Rahm. To give to Vimmel so they can take the statue to Mr. Rahm and get £4,000. And this is interesting when we find out they don't have a bank account.
You get it from a bank.
What, rob it?
What? No, we'll borrow it from a bank. This is gilt-edged security, isn't it?
Bill, you can't stroll into a bank and ask for a loan to help you pull off a con trick. Besides, we haven't got a bank account.
Now, that is something that is unheard of, I think, in this day and age, for someone to not have a bank account. Obviously, Del and Rodney, we know they live outside of the system, but I think it's just interesting to hear that, because I can't think of anyone who doesn't have a bank account in this day and age, and I don't know how common it would have been in the early 80s to not have a bank account. I
don't know about how common it is, but I know that they can't have a bank account if they don't pay income tax. I mean, Del mentions a lot of the time that they deal in readies or whatever. It's not like he's going to take a check or like a credit card for something. Everything he does is cash.
Yeah.
So yeah, he doesn't need a bank account, does he?
No, that's true.
Yeah, just going back to the scene in the hotel room, there were a couple of things I had. I just really love the bit where Vimmel walks out the hotel room and Rodney's like,
now, just excuse me, won't you?
Oh, certainly, yes.
As if he wouldn't have noticed that.
I know.
That's so funny. And then, like, the line with the Ming is so funny, where he's like...
Of course, I'm a Ming fan myself, you know. Oh, yeah, he made some wonderful stuff, didn't he, that Ming? Yeah. Pity he went and died when he did, didn't it, eh?
Ming was a dynasty, Derek.
I don't care what he was, Vimmel, he made a smashing vase.
But yeah, then you've also got one time here where Rodney challenges Del's bad French.
The French have a saying, Rodney. Bully boys, mon ami.
Bully boys, mon ami. That means fish stew, my friend.
Which, is interesting, because a lot of the time in the future, he just doesn't. Like, no one ever does. Even all the way up until Time on Our Hands, and Raquel's like, please don't use any of your French phrases. And Del still doesn't know that he's bad at French, even all that time in the future. Yeah, I guess he does challenge the French, but this is one of the first times he does.
Yeah.
When he actually translates what Del says.
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
Which is unusual. And that is it, I think.
Yeah, I mean...
all I had for... Oh, no, the comment where he says he's going to sell his jewellery, and he says...
We could flog... here, my jewellery. That'd bring in enough. I mean, it's 27 carat.
I thought it was 9 carat.
That was when I was buying, now I'm selling.
Another little bit of information for the audience, that everything Del he flips, but he changes it. They mentioned Grandad. Grandad is horribly absent from this episode. It would have been so nice if they'd popped in and Grandad had had a couple of lines while they were deciding what to sell. I don't know the reason why he wasn't
it's possible, I guess, at this point they were trying to save money. I mean, every time you have an actor in the TV who has lines, you have to pay them. Maybe they didn't have to pay Grandad for this episode.
Yeah, maybe. And also, I think, if you think about it, do you think this episode could have been the pilot?
Could have been.
Could easily have been a pilot, couldn't it?
Like, there's no reason why it wouldn't. Their characters, but without Grandad in it, that wouldn't have been a very good pilot, would it?
Yeah. But if it had been the pilot, people watching it would have thought this is a totally different type of show, because they didn't have the flat and they didn't have they had the weird music at the start and like the kind of crime kind of edge to it. Feels like a different kind of show. I mean, it could almost have been aired without a laugh track and it wouldn't have felt that weird. So
yeah, true.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah.
I was just going to say, by the end of this scene, Del has, of course, convinced Rodney this is a good idea and let's do this stupid plot. So then we go to the montage. So we have another montage here. We had one in Big Brother and we've got another one here. As Jenny mentioned earlier, with the original music, it's quite a different tone. And the stop motion is really an unusual choice for this, because the Big Brother montage was filmed almost like someone watching from across the street in, normal recording style, where it's just Del walking in and out of stores and things like this. And this one is done I say it's stop motion because it's just jumping around. I'm not sure if that's the correct terminology to describe this type of shot, but yeah, it's a very unusual filming style. I'm not sure if you have any information as to why it was chosen to be filmed like that.
No, I mean, I think it might just be of its time. I have to admit that I don't think I really watched this montage before until last night. Like, I've always just known it was the montage and kind of sort of switched off. I did notice a couple of things while I was watching it. I never noticed that he goes into the secondhand clothes shop and he scoops up a bunch of the clothes that are outside.
I've written that down. Yeah, it's very
before.
funny, that part. Yeah, when he takes the clothes into the secondhand shop to sell them back to the secondhand shop.
Yeah, the secondhand car site that's used in this shot is the same one from Go West Young Man. That's in the book. Also, continuity issue. Del sells all of his jewelry, and then in the next episode he's got it back. I mean, they do keep the Vauxhall Velox as being gone forever, but he does sell his D necklace that he wears in every single episode forever. He sells it.
I guess that's something, if it went to a pawn shop, right? So you can buy back from a pawn shop, and maybe Del would have prioritized that as something to buy back.
It says in the script, jeweler.
I mean, I always assumed it was a pawn shop because he said, I'm going to have to put, he mentions a few times, I'm going to have to pawn all the jewelry again, aren't I?
He does, but in this episode he doesn't say that. But I mean, obviously he must have pawned it because he gets it back. But it says in the script jeweler, and he doesn't say he's going to pawn it. He says he's going to sell it. That's when I was buying, now I'm selling.
Yeah, true.
Like he didn't, But I mean, he sells it to a jeweler, so maybe he just went back in and got it, but...
I mean, Del knows everyone, doesn't he? So I'm sure he knew the jeweler well, probably as a friend, and he could get it back from him, maybe. So back to Vimmel, dump the completely not obvious bags of cash on the table that they must have walked in with.
Is he a burglar? Just a little swag sign on it.
Yeah, those bags of cash are did they just walk in with those in their hands and walking around with these bags of cash? But yes, he obviously hands over a lot of cash to Vimmel, £2,000, and then we get the absolutely out of place in this episode, but hilarious Del falling down the stairs in slow motion and the statue flying out of his hand.
Hey! Trotters! What about that, my son? Here I
I think one of the things that makes this, obviously David Jason's performance is hilarious, but also David Jason's vocals in this fall is really funny. It reminds me of Hugo, Victor and Hugo.
That's what I said, yeah.
They are the bunglers in crime. Victor and Hugo.
Yeah, if in case anyone who's listening doesn't know that David Jason voiced Hugo in the maybe not that well known animated series Victor and Hugo, which was a spin-off of Danger Mouse, right?
Yeah, it was. Jenny and I absolutely love Victor and Hugo, so you might hear a few references to that in
Well,
this
David
podcast.
Jason is Danger Mouse as well,
Yes,
right?
he is. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, but Hugo, like, there's quite a lot of times throughout Only Fools and Horses when David Jason does a Hugo voice, and this is the first time he does it.
Yes.
It's very, very Hugo.
Here.
Yes, I agree with you. So yeah, this Hugo fall is very funny. Yeah, kind of thing. And then obviously the payoff is fantastic when, you know, it's all set up for Rodney's cringing and Dell's rolling and slowly. And then of course the catching of the statue gets an applause, which it absolutely should, because it's just so perfectly choreographed, that whole part. I think it's very funny. Again, a little bit out of place in this episode, but very funny the way that it's shown.
Yeah, I think it's great. It's another example of the way that they litter the physical comedy into these first series. A lot of the episodes are very dialogue heavy, a lot of like quips and fast dialogue, but the physical comedy is perfectly balanced.
Yes.
In my opinion, in this episode. And yeah, I think that scene is great. Very well done.
Yeah, completely agree. So then we move on to the Indian restaurant. They go back to find Mr. Ram in what he said was his restaurant. And of course, this is where they find out they've been conned. So we've got a few fantastic one-liners, mainly from the...
We want to see the real owner, right?
I am the real owner.
So I think one of the funniest lines they start when he says,
Oh, I was having a couple of meals here quite recently. You must remember me.
I'm sorry. You're look-alike to me.
the Indian guy saying that to Del and Rodney, I think is hilarious. Again, playing on the stereotypes, flipping the script. And also just using some of the British slang words.
No, it's can't. No, there's a mistake. There's got to be a mistake. I mean, he told me he owned this restaurant. He told me he owned 18 of them, in fact.
Maybe he was fibbing.
Fibbing?
It's very, very funny as well. And
it's amazing what you can save if you shop around.
I mean, that's just a fantastic way to... Do you remember how much the statue was for, dude?
Is it £12 something?
I thought it was £17.50. I don't know if we can check that, so you got that right.
You can get them in Portobello Road for £17 each.
I didn't write it down, but I think it was £17.50. But
£17, actually, it says in the script. I just noticed here that there's a typo in the script.
Oh, really?
And I thought that it was me, like, mishearing it, but it's not. It says that the Indian man says, because I love the line,
Look, I don't know any Mr. Bloody Ram, so will you please leave? You drunks always come here causing trouble.
So, like, he says that here, and then it says in the script, you dunks always come in here causing trouble. And I always thought it was drunk, and then I'm like, but it is drunk, because then Del says, we're not drunks, okay? Like it says in the next line. So there's a typo. You dunks always going in, causing trouble. Although I don't know where these scripts come from, but they're like so perfect. I have to assume they're the accurate scripts that were used. But yeah,
people might have transcribed them. If they did, they might have made some errors. But I mean, it's
I don't
possible
think
for
so.
the original script to have errors as well. They do. Scripts have errors sometimes.
Yeah, this can't be a transcript because it's got all of the scene setting stuff and the character descriptions and everything that John Sullivan wrote in it. So it's got to be the OG. Actually, there's a book you can buy, so it's probably just the book.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know why there'd be typo. Yeah, it's funny.
That's funny. That's funny. I was going to say that this is. Again, one of the few times we see Del and Rodney sort of realizing that they are the ones that have been conned and they really don't know what to do about it. But I do find the whole exchange with the proprietor of the Indian restaurant to be absolutely hilarious. I think they play off each other so well because he's so calm and he doesn't care and they really care. And it's just wonderful, that exchange between the two of them.
Yeah, this guy's really good. And he is great at playing the part of a guy in retail or restaurant worker that has to deal with douchebags and idiots all the time. The way that he like rolls his eyes kind of behind him and he's like, oh yeah, that Mr. Ram, like, and he rolls his eyes. And then when Rodney's doing all the descriptive stuff, Laurie uses the napkin to illustrate a beard because he thinks he doesn't understand him. Like, he's obviously like got that classic patience of somebody that works with the public. He plays the part really, really well. And the way he delivers that last line with the amazing what you can do when you shop around, that is perfect.
Yes, agree.
Yeah, but yeah, this is the realization, and I forgot I was gonna say at the last scene where Del falls down the stairs, you're tricked, aren't you, as an audience member, as thinking that this is actually the twist.
Yes.
that they've done all this work and then Dell's going to smash the statue. So I like the fact that they do that right before this scene, because you're like, oh my God, he's going to smash the statue and lose all the money.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, thank God, everything's going to be okay. And then they go in here and then they realize that the statue's worthless. Yeah, so...
Yeah, you're right. I didn't think
clever,
about that
I
because I
think.
said it was out of place in this episode because it doesn't feel like it fits. But yeah, that's probably why it was there. You're right. It's the fake out before the big reveal that actually this is what the problem is, that they've been conned. Yeah.
But yeah, that's it. You've got your realization. The second that this man delivers that line, they both look at each other and realize that's it.
Yeah, and I
That's the
think
moment.
I do genuinely feel quite sorry for both of them in that moment, but we'll get to the last scene with them, so to talk about how they really deal with it. So the next scene we have a conversation between Mr. Arm and Vimmel, where we realise they're best friends and they have been doing this all around England and they're now heading off to do it in another city. And the one thing I wrote here is, why has no one reported them? This is the thing that I wrote down. Now, obviously, for Del and Rodney, it makes sense. They address this at the end, like why Del and Rodney can't go to the police.
Right, let's go to the police.
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea, that is. Oh, that's marvellous. We'd give them a good laugh down there, couldn't we, eh? But just imagine it. Trotter brothers conned out of £2,000. Be all over the manor in no time.
But surely not everybody they conned is in the same situation as Del and Rodney, where they feel like they can't go to the police and say, these two people conned us and told us this elaborate story and it wasn't true. Surely.
I don't know, because I don't think I have to assume that the police wouldn't care about a little thing like this, especially when the two people you can't actually find them and they so they're no longer physically around. Although, did Vimmel sell his hotel and leave? That's a bit confusing because it was his hotel, right?
I thought Vimmel was just staying there. That was the point when he says your story about how well off you were clearly wasn't true, Vimmel, because he's staying in a hotel rather than he's got his own flat. At least that's how I interpreted it. I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I guess I always thought Vimmel owned the hotel, but yeah, now that you mention that, it says Vimmel's hotel in the script, but maybe it just meant his hotel room. Yeah,
because
I didn't think the police would care about
staying
this.
in a room in that hotel, so he just leaves the hotel as soon as he's got the money and he scarpers.
Yeah.
So
I think now that I'm older, I have a completely different view of the way that law enforcement works, and in my opinion, it's not just that it's not that they don't care, but there aren't resources or there isn't time, and there just isn't they're going to be the payoff for them. They wouldn't chase after something like this.
No, it's true. I think it would be more that by the time they con Del and Rodney, they seem to, I can't remember exactly how many places they list that they've already done this.
Now we've done Cardiff, Bristol, Southampton, and now North and South London. Where to next?
I love this though. This is so classic. Let's see, what have we done so far in our scam? And now what shall we do in our scam? Hey, scam buddy. I know that it's essential.
They have to do that to establish, otherwise we wouldn't know. If they just went, great, let's go, we wouldn't have a clue what the whole background was. So we do need to know that.
So they say that these people are exploiting the religious bigotry of the immigrants.
Yeah.
Which is totally true. The way that people would view them as being, oh, look at these people. The one, Del calls it
the wonderful caste system
that he's able to exploit. So it does show that is what he was thinking. But interestingly enough, the way that a lot of people view immigrants, especially in this country, is that they're criminals. So they wouldn't look at them and think, oh, how can I exploit the religious bigotry? They would assume they were criminals right away. So yeah, that's a different thing.
Yeah, I think the attitude's probably changed a lot. You're right, over the years. I'm just wondering about sort of that particular time period, what the attitude was, and if this was a common thing that people sort of looked at immigrants this way as sort of naive and people they could exploit, and that was how they were seen in the early 1980s. I just wondered.
Yeah, I don't know, because as we go back to, we weren't born until the mid 80s. But yeah, I think the way that things are in the UK right now, I feel like it's not that different. The way that people are, bigoted towards different religions that they don't understand and different cultures and stuff. I don't think Del and Rodney went and they don't seek people out based on things like this. They just saw an opportunity, or at least it shows that Del is smart enough to smell out a money-making opportunity anywhere, because he doesn't just target immigrants, does he?
Del and Rodney didn't target anyone. They were targeted. And they made made out that they were the ones targeting. It made them feel like they were the ones coming up with the scheme, but they didn't realise that the scheme had already been concocted and they were just playing into the scheme that was already established by Mr. Rahm and Vimmel. So
yeah, and I think like the important thing to note here that this scene really does tell you is that there's a lot of Del boys in this area, or at least in the UK, that they were able to pull this scheme off in Cardiff, Bristol, Southampton, and South London, that there's Del boys everywhere, because these are going to be the kind of people they're going to exploit. If people have just got £2,000 sitting around, they're probably not going to be the same people that they target. They're probably going to target people who are looking to make a good £2,000 out of this, or maybe even £3,000. Like, so yeah. So yeah, we do get the story explained in the car. That's pretty much that's the conclusion, isn't it?
And then one more line that I want to mention in the final scene between Del and Rodney, just because I'm an actor and I trained learning about Shakespeare. It's very funny to me.
Macbeth said to Hamlet in Midsummer Night's Dream, "We've been done up like a couple of kippers."
So 3 different Shakespeare plays that Del references, and then he says, "We've been done up like a couple of kippers," which I don't believe is a Shakespearean quote. But yes, it's very, very funny. I think, this just, again, the episode ends on this sort of Del and Rodney got screwed, and they're not going to be able to come back from this. And of course, we're led to believe here they've sold everything they have. They're completely gutted. So, as Jenny mentioned in the last episode, there's the continuity from episode to episode. It's like the previous episode never happened, and everything's back, sort of resets itself every week, which was a very common TV trope back in those days. You know, they didn't do sort of serialized storytelling as much at that time as they do now.
I mean, this episode, they don't go to the flat, so we don't know whether it's still the same month on the calendar as Big Brother and Go West Young Man, because the same month is still on the calendar in second time around. So that's what I wrote about in my notes about the continuity, is that there's no way that you could see Big Brother, Go West Young Man and second time around being in the same month. But this can't have all happened in a month. They sold all their stuff and all this. So, like, yeah, this episode almost feels like you could pluck it out and put it anywhere. You could put it at the beginning, you could put it at the end, you could put it 2 months before. It's not really, it doesn't fall into a timeline quite as well as the rest of this series one.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't understand why Grandad was renting a telly. Why? He's got 3 tellies already, right?
Yeah, I don't understand. I mean, the idea of renting tellies is not something that people, as far as I know, would do anymore either. This is a very outdated thing. People buy them or they have them secondhand, but renting a telly.
But if they went into the flat and took the telly to sell, wouldn't Grandad have said something as well? Unless they sneaked it out in the night.
No, because they'd have to have paid the actor to say something. Anyway, yes, so I think that wraps it up for our summary of the episode. So let's move on to our award segment. So Jenny, do you want to take this one?
And guess what? He's only one.
Okay, so yeah, as always, we've got the 3 awards to announce this week. We'll start with Plonker of the Week.
What's a plonker?
For Plonker of the Week, we each choose a potential plonker, then we discuss and we decide. So go ahead, dude. Who's your plonker?
Okay, so my plonker of the week is, again, quite an obscure one, because this episode, I didn't think of Del and Rodney as plonkers here. I thought they were genuinely just trying to make some money, and I didn't think what they did was particularly stupid necessarily, maybe a little bit naive. So my plonker is Odd Job, because he gets hit in the crotch more than once, and he should know not to stand anywhere near Del by the time he gets hit in the crotch the final time in the restaurant. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, I can give you that. Odd Job is probably the worst bodyguard ever, because he doesn't do anything at all, and he manages to get injured in the most ridiculous ways.
Exactly.
Yeah. I actually found it very difficult this week. This is a really tough one. I wrote in my notes that I put Del and Rodney are plonkers just because they fall for the scam, which I can totally understand why they did fall for the scam. I would fall for, well, I don't know if I would fall for this, because I think the reason that they fell for it is this money-making blindness, which Del struggles with for the whole of the duration of the show. He goes at it like a mad bull, like Raquel says. Mm-hmm. He never thinks about consequences or potentials for a scam, except very occasionally you do see him smell out a scam. But, the premise of the show is that he does get conned a lot, or he makes a lot of mistakes, or things go wrong. In this case, I mean, I don't know, you should be able to tell from the very beginning that these guys are a con man. Lurking in parking lots, something didn't quite fit right with the fact that they spoke and then they couldn't speak. What happens if they bump into each other in a parking lot again? And talk about the deal.
Yeah, that's the biggest red flag. You're right. That first scene,
Yeah.
that first part where they spoke to each other. But I, from Del and Rodney's perspective, and if you consider they speak to them individually, Mr. Arm and then Vimmel, and hear the whole story, if you didn't know the end of the episode, it sounds quite genuine. So I honestly wouldn't. I feel like it wasn't so much stupid as it was naive, which I do think are different things. That's why I didn't choose Del and Rodney. But of course, they were not smart. Is the right way to say for doing this. But as you said, they smelt the money. So I don't know.
I do feel sorry for Del and Rodney in this episode. So yeah, we're not gonna. Let's give Odd Job the award then.
Okay.
Okay, so Odd Job is the plonker of the week.
Here, what happened?
Okay, and then let's move on. So this week, Heather is going to choose the best line of the episode. Sorry, yeah, the best line of the episode.
Line of the episode. Now, yeah.
Okay, dude, what's your best line?
Okay, so this one I actually had trouble because I absolutely love the entire exchange with the Indian restaurant owner in the final part where Del and Rodney find out. And I honestly couldn't think of just one of those lines. I just thought that entire scene and all of the lines that he says to Del and Rodney are just absolute gold. The intonation, the
UK gold.
Yeah, the UK gold. The sort of looking down on them, thinking they're drunks, like just the whole attitude of that guy who played that Indian restaurant owner. Does he have a name in the script, or is he just Indian restaurant owner?
It just says man, I think.
Man, yeah. I mean, considering he had a part that didn't even have a name, he absolutely nailed it. It's absolutely hilarious, that entire exchange.
Yeah, I would call him the restaurant owner. It says in the script, an Indian approaches, and then it just says man in the script, so yeah.
So yes.
Man has the best line, right?
Well done, man.
I am the proprietor of this restaurant.
And then, Jenny, you have chosen the best moment of the episode this week, yes?
Yeah, so finally decided the best moment for me is the statue falling down the steps moment. I think that would probably be the best moment for me, just from visual point of view. There's lots of nice exchanges in this episode, but I think that's the funniest moment. I did get the applause from the audience after all.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think that is a scene that's like a perfect little clip that you could play out of this episode that wouldn't need any context and it would still be hilarious.
Yeah.
So yeah. Okay.
Any honourable mentions? I guess we've mentioned quite a lot of stuff.
I think, again, this episode for me on the whole, it wasn't so much about being funny because it was very plot driven, and again, one of the few times that Del and Rodney can't or don't seem to come back from a failure, or they don't get the people back that get them in trouble. But I think it's an enjoyable episode. I think it's interesting and unique in many ways.
Yeah, there you go. So drink up, we're leaving.
So that about wraps it up for this week. So join us next week when we will be discussing Series 1, Episode 4, the second time around. And until then... Au revoir, listeners. If you like what you hear and want to contact us, you can email us at longlivehooky street podcast@gmail.com. All one word, no spaces. Bonjour.